Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
I'm Egbert, the owner of this station. Check out my website at egbert.com. That's E-G-G-B-U-R-T, egbert.com. Now it's back to Brad and John. Check out their website at bjshow.co. The BJ Show? Come on, guys. Anyway, here's B and J.
Channeling back to Rush Limbaugh. Executing the show flawlessly. Never making a mistake.
Flawless execution.
Yeah, more like flawful. Is that a word? Flawful?
It might be. And so for anybody who's listening on the live stream, John is the reason why Brad's schedule is off today.
Well,
so we're all about accountability here. And John caused Brad to be off schedule, just so everybody knows. And also, Brad's just super hyped today because it's the Olivia Rodrigo concert today.
Let me give you a compliment. John is like a machine. And when John checks in the morning, I can tell you plus or minus 20 seconds when John's going to call in, okay? Because once again, John is not in the studio. He's remote, okay? And what happened this morning was John had some issues trying to get his connection established here to the studio. And quite honestly, it's thrown me off because of the fact that there's a routine you get into. John calls at like 6:56, and then I got to check a couple things. I got to make sure the recorder's recording so we can chop up the show and put it onto the podcast and the YouTube and stuff like that. And this morning we had trouble establishing contact, so we were off by 2 or 3 or 4 minutes. And quite honestly, it's thrown me into a weird loop where I'm not getting stuff done. So anyway,
but we're into it now. And by the way, everybody who went to my website around 6:57. The website was I mean, the one thing that won't be missing, Brad, is johncombest.com. And that's generally our lead in the top segment of the day.
And you do that before you go on the air, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so in other words, usually you put that, it's, as I guess we could say in the parlance of the newspaper industry, you put your website to bed right before we go on the air. So when you get on here, like at our first break, you are giving hot news right off the website, right?
That's exactly right. And in the olden days, so pre-November, pre-11/20/2023, I would add final stories between about 7 a.m. and 7:15. So people could come right at 7 and then come back around 7:15. And anything I missed, people would text me or direct message me and let me know what I missed. And so now, that moves the schedule up a little bit. And Brad, that reminds me, you know what we haven't talked about before we get into the top 3? My number one peeve about morning radio people. Can I kvetch about this a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
The number one thing my number one pet peeve about people who do radio morning shows, and by the way, this is almost universally people under the age of, we'll call it 30. People who do morning shows who post to social media and say, oh, look at the alarm on my clock. I got to wake up at 4:30 to do my morning show. I got to wake up at 4 o'clock and go do my job. If you don't want to do a morning show and you don't want to wake up early, then don't do a morning show.
Well,
if you are going to do a morning show, we don't care about your efforting. We don't care that I got to get up at the butt crack of dawn. It's still dark when I wake up. If you don't like what you're doing, quit. We don't need to see your alarm. You don't need to go sympathy fishing. Right now, this morning there was a mom, I'm sure, waking up in Spanish Lake, Brad, who had to get her kids to daycare at 6 a.m. and she had to make food for them before she left because she's going to go take care of old people's adult diapers at a nursing home. How many times do you think that woman post to social media in the morning about, oh, I'm up so early. Look at the sacrifices I make for my job. Everybody on Instagram give me approval. No, she goes to work and she does her job. Morning show people, I don't want to hear you kvetch about how hard it is. You don't like it? Do an afternoon show.
John, I couldn't agree with you more, but there's other professions that I would do the same thing. It's like teachers. Oh, it's so tough being a teacher. I never have to work on Saturday and Sunday, which is really tough. I get 3 months off in the summer and we don't make any money. And yet every time I hear that from a teacher, I go, and it's funny, every single time I've had this happen, either a teacher or a retired teacher, and I'll say, do you know who Dave Ramsey is? And they always go, yeah, I know who Dave Ramsey is. And some of them have taken his course. And I go, are you familiar with this very in-depth study that Dave Ramsey did where he identified the top 5 professions of millionaires in the United States. And you know what number 3 is? It's teacher. And they all go, whoa,
Brad, thanks to
you,
we just have a brand new number 3. The previous number 3 in our top 3 has been booted thanks to Brad Hildebrand, because I got a gem for number 3 for you.
Okay, well, so let's get into this, though, into the show. John does this every single day of his life for 22 years. He puts together a list of all these things going on in the state of Missouri. Some of them are political, some of them are news, stuff like that. Usually 20 to 30, maybe on a good day, 40 different things. He comes into the radio station and does the top 3, and we don't mess around. We get big-time talent like...
I'm Casey Kasem.
And he says...
We're on our way to the number 1. Now on with the countdown. In third place...
And John does the number 3 one.
Brad, you talked about teachers, and I have some, quote, alarming, unquote, news for you, Brad.
What's that?
The Missouri State Teachers Association did a survey. Did you know that 70% of Missouri teachers, quote, think about, unquote, leaving the profession? This number is both concerning and alarming, Brad, and teachers have had enough. The Springfield News Leader made this their top story. Yes, their top story today. I subscribe to the News Leader because hashtag support local journalism. So I pay every month to get an email newsletter. And the lead story, Brad, is that these teachers, you know what? They're thinking about it. They're thinking about leaving the profession. They're totally going to do it maybe someday. They're thinking about it, Brad. So the answer to this, of course, is better pay. We need to pay teachers more. Maybe, Brad, I know you disagree with me, but I think we should go to either a 1-day or 3-day a week school week. We either go to the Sunday school model, or maybe we just go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and give everybody a longer break. So check it out. It's on my website today. It's from the Springfield News Leader.
John, once again, you and I are sort of like very similar in certain things. It's like me and the minimum wage thing. When these people call me like, well, we need a 20, I say, why not $100 an hour? And we go, well,
why not?
Why? Yeah, why? Well, they do that. I go like, okay, well, if that would be a nice living wage. They all complain about having a living wage.
And you've done the math, Brad. You work a few hours a week, you could have a pretty decent life.
I told you, if I'm telling you, if there were minimum wage right now, I'd go back to work at Steak and Shake. I'd work 1 day a week. I'd work 10 hours. I'd make $1,000 a week, and I'd have 6 days off. That would be one hell of a living wage. Think about that. You make $52,000 a year. You got 6 days off. What a life you could have. I mean,
it's not too shabby, Brad.
You could travel every single week. Now, I know it's expensive, but, I'm a car kind of guy. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, man, every single week I could take a trip and, let's say
Vegas. You could drive to Vegas. You've done that drive before.
Well, yeah, but that would be sort of hard because of the fact that it's like a 3-day out and 3-day back. So that wouldn't be, but yet you could drive to Chicago, spend a couple nights in Chicago. You could drive to Indy. Indy's got a really neat downtown area. I mean, there's places.
They do. Now, hold on, Brad. The trouble with your plan there is that you don't even get summers off. So maybe you should be a teacher, Brad.
Well, we can talk about that. Is any of your number 1, is the number 2, we'll have to find out, number 2 or number 1 going to be the Hazelwood thing?
No.
Okay, we'll talk about that in the second break.
Let's talk about that in second break.
Yeah, second break, because there's news on that, and I have a couple of friends that still work in Hazelwood, and boy, I got some interesting, weird feedback from them.
Yeah, I want to hear about it.
Okay, now.
Up a notch to number 2.
The 3rd Congressional District has yet another candidate. State Representative Justin Hicks, who represents Lake St. Louis, entered the race on Monday. Now, there's 2 stories here, Brad. The first one is that Representative Hicks has entered the race. His statement is that Washington is broken. It's filled with career politicians, kind of what you would expect from somebody, a fresh face running for Congress. But the Post-Dispatch also ran a story about the fact that Representative Hicks has been embroiled in a controversy back in his own district. And you and I talked about this, I think it was back in December when the story first broke, because the Post-Dispatch wrote about it. There's a gentleman running against, or who was running against, Representative Hicks in the Republican primary in Lake St. Louis, who brought up what are supposedly legitimate court documents from when Representative Hicks was 17. His then girlfriend, who at the time was 19, Representative Hicks was charged at the time, or alleged at the time, to have carried his girlfriend out to a car, perhaps assaulted her, something to that regard. The guy running against her, this gentleman named Max Calfo, set up a website where he underscored this legal document. I haven't been to that website in a while, but I believe he also claimed that Representative Hicks was exaggerating his military record, if I recall correctly. Anyway, the Post-Dispatch has a story up that I linked to today where this gentleman, Max Calfo, says that Representative Hicks is suing him for the release of what Hicks calls private documents. So in short, it appears as though Representative Hicks, and Representative Hicks wanted the case against Calfo to be sealed. So it's a unique convergence of events here, and that the same time, obviously, this Calfo gentleman wants to highlight the fact that that Justin Hicks is suing him to keep a lawsuit sealed, and then Representative Hicks is running for Congress. So I have a theory on why this is all happening, but I'd like your reaction to this first, or anything you've heard.
Well, first off, don't get me going on this kind of stuff. I mean, I endured, and I go back to this, I endured the Senate race when Brian Nieves was running against a three-way primary race, or actually four ways, running against Jack, what was the name? The guy's name was he was a Air Force or a Boeing,
Jack Jackson.
Jack Jackson, Boeing test pilot. Wonderful guy. We're running against Dick Stratman, the former mayor of Washington, and a guy who always runs for everything in Franklin County. And, they talk about collateral damage. Me, as the owner of the radio station, received much collateral damage on that.
Yeah,
because
the kids call those stray shots. Right?
Yes.
You got a lot of stray shots.
Right, stray shots. Because of the fact that I realized, up close and personal, that politics is a blood sport. And we're not talking blood sport where knives and daggers. We're talking, M4 machine guns, and we're talking, C4 explosive. I mean, obviously, I'm being exaggerating, but it's nasty stuff. Now, I don't quite I saw this yesterday in the headlines, the Post-Dispatch. I don't subscribe, so I look at the headlines, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, what's this? But what's the deal? Why is he doing this? Is he running against him, or is he just trying to destroy his career?
You mean the Calfo guy that's running against Hicks?
Yeah. Is he just doing this to destroy Hicks' career, or what's he up to?
I don't know. And I mean, I think so assume positive intent. So assume that this Max Calfo guy really wants to be a state representative. And by the way, as it stands now, Max Calfo is the only Republican filed to run in this district. So it's possible Calfo will be elected essentially by acclamation to be in the state house. I don't know. Excuse me. And, my take on this. So to be clear, I don't know Representative Hicks. I've never met him. I don't know much about his situation other than what I've read. But I have seen Brad in the past, and I can think of one specific instance that happened in St. Charles County. State representatives who are tired of being state representatives and essentially got burned out by the process right away, deciding to run for Congress. They know that they really don't have a chance to win, but they just throw it all in and say, you know what? Screw all you guys. I'm done with this. I'm running for Congress. We're going to see what happens. And it's essentially a passive way for them to end their political career. There's no shame in saying you ran for Congress and lost. A lot of really accomplished people can say they ran for Congress and lost. So again, I don't know Representative Hicks, but this seems like a situation where he says, you know what? I'm done with Jeff City. I'm done with this. Let's run for Congress. You know what? Justin Hicks in a year could be very happily away from politics and moving on in his life.
I can't remember if I met him before. Now, I'm going to ask you a weird question. Did he used to own Kentucky Fried Chicken stores? Because here's the deal. I guess it was back in 2020 where we went to an event out at the Family Arena, Shelly and I. That's where we met Pinky and Stripes, believe it or not. I met one of the reps, and it was interesting. He owned Kentucky Fried Chicken stores, and I thought it was Hicks. Maybe not. I can't remember. Okay.
I don't know. I not that I'm aware of. So we'll see what happens here. But and now we're reaching that point that we talked about before, Brad, where you get so many people entering this race that then it just becomes a free for all.
Well, yeah, like you say, and to the point where you divide the cake up in so many slices. This is to the point where it can happen where the guy who spends, like, for example, the Mike Carter thing. When he ran for state senate, there were like 4 or 5 guys in there, and he spent, $500,000, and he lost. I mean, and he was beaten by what? I think Fitzwater, wasn't that who beat him?
Yep, that's who won.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. Here we go.
The number one.
The Biden budget is out, and Senator Eric Schmidt calls it a mishmash, Brad, a mishmash of liberal wish list items. Senator Schmidt says the budget shows that Joe Biden has no regard for the plight of everyday Americans. The rest of the U.S. Senate has also piled on to the topic of the Biden budget. So you can expect that we'll be debating this and immigration, day to day, every day in the next coming weeks. Immigration, by the way, was going to be the number 3 story before, Brad, you so eloquently put your comments about teachers' attitude about their profession. A lot of immigration news yesterday. The Venezuelan woman who was an illegal alien who killed that boy in the Hazelwood crash. Lieutenant Governor Mike Kehoe was on Reardon's show, co-hosted by Brad Young, talking about immigration. Bill Eigel has a proposal in the Missouri Senate to strengthen our immigration laws. Immigration will be a top topic, of course, every day heading into the primary and the general.
Well, the thing that bothers me about the immigration thing, and then we'll take a break. The thing that bothers me about the immigration thing is, remember, and I'm not saying this because I'm a Trumper. I'm just saying this is what the situation was. Immigration was somewhat in check under the Trump administration. And the first thing that Joe Biden did with his executive orders was blow all that stuff up. So to me, it's like, now he's saying, well, Biden's going like, well, the Congress won't go along with my bill.
Yep.
Dude, just go back and redo the executive orders that Trump put in. If you undid them, you can do them. I mean, what's the thing? What was the Barack thing? He's got a phone and a pen. He can do pretty much whatever he wants.
Yeah. And Brad, and of course, the underlying assumption there is that Joe Biden actually wants to do something about this. And we got corrected, by the way. Our friend Camelia Peterson, who's listening live, points out that the gentleman you're thinking of is Ron Hicks, former state representative. Yeah, and he owns KFCs, and now he is a ganja, a cannabis, a marijuana lobbyist with our friend Ethan Thampy.
Really?
Yeah, doing a little bit of the wacky tobacco lobbying.
So I had the right.
This is per Camelia, and she's an expert on these things.
I had the last name correct, but just the first name was wrong.
You
right?
did.
Okay,
you did so many Justins, and you know what? Let's face it. So many Hicks.
Right. Well, some people say Missouri's full of Hicks, but that's a whole other story.
So many Hicks.
Okay. Camelia, thank you so much. God, that gal is sharp. I'm telling you.
She is.
I mean.
She's many things. I mean, we could say many things about her, Brad. You started your interview with her by pointing out that she's an attractive young lady. That was the verbatim descriptor of her.
And, I did that on purpose because of the fact that shows that I'm an unenlightened guy, because you can't say that anymore.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Well, but you know what? Once again, I had an interaction with someone yesterday, which was sort of interesting because of the fact that, well, I'll tell you what, let's pick that up the next. I don't understand how you can get in trouble for giving people compliments nowadays. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on who the compliment is coming from, Brad. We all know that.
Yeah, but,
I love talking about this topic. Let's talk about it when we come back.
Okay.
Hey, remember, I threw us a couple minutes off, and we're already in John overtime right now.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?